Yes, friends, in this session we have to discuss with the macro, how we will use the macro. Macro is the very biggest part in the Excel and very useful part in the Excel. So now we will use the macro, why we use the macro, macro in some places, uh, what is a macro and what is the task of macro, what can macro can do this. We can discuss here. Why we macro, types of macro, example of macro. What do you mean by the macro? First, a macro is a name like an algorithm set of action that can use the multiple times. In the macro is a one type of algorithm. We can use this algorithm at multiple times. When we use the macro, at that time we have to first set of instruction, run a multiple times, and macro has the automatically repeated task by recording, storing one input sequence like a mouse, keyboard, and mouse dots, keyboard press. There are two types of macro, particularly we will store. Keyboard shortcut key, we will use the macro. Mouse shortcut key, we will use the macro. Macro create a one type of set of algorithm. You can see that it is a one type of particularly create a work as a robot work. Multiple times one work it will be do. That is a called as a macro. Macro is a set of instruction that can we will run the multiple times. We use the macro and run the multiple times. The first we will use for conditional formatting, for example, in Excel, and we will do this macro on a multiple times. Multiple times we will use the macro, so macro is will be usable from your side. When the set of instruction, set, particular, there are lots of action, lots of work we are doing the multiple times. At that time, we have to use the macro. If you task in Microsoft Excel that you don't do repeatedly and you can record the macro automated those tasks. But macro have some limitation also, yes. Advantage and disadvantage is available, so limitation is also available in the macro. If you have a Microsoft Excel and you do it repeatedly, you can record the macro automated those tasks. Automatically macro work from those tasks. Macro is an Excel set of instruction. You can run the multiple times. When you create a macro, you are recording your mouse click or keyboard stroke. There are types of macro. Which types of macro is available? Record macro, coding macro. Macro is either recording it macro or the VBA editor. Recording or coding macro is available from your side. Coding macro is available. Recording macro is available. You can do the both the side, but yes, like with using of recording macro, you cannot doing all these things. So at that time, we have to do with the coding macro, right? The next, generally Excel file extension security issue about the macro usage. Security is allowed in the macro usage. Generally, file extension is XLSX. File extension is XLXX, right? Whenever the macro enable file extension is XLSM. So XLSS is a not allowed. So macro enable file are used XLSM file. So make sure that if the file is macro file, then you have to file extension is Excel SM, not a Excel SF. So make sure that the file extension is Excel SX is a Excel enable file. This is a if the macro enable file, then file enable extension is Excel SF. Whenever you run the macro, at that time macro enable turn on, name of the macro you are enter, It is assign the shortcut key. It is the save the macro, give the description. This is optional part, and recording is started. Whenever we are recording the macro, at that time, first you have to start the macro, run the macro, and work the macro. So we have to do with this macro. On the basis of this macro, we have to do the work. Step for macro enter the recorder, it is stopped. Security about the macro is XMSL and XML. Running the macro record, option 1 in the status bar. You can use in the status bar, you can start the macro. Right click on macro and macro recording is also available. Under the view tab, there is a macro button and record macro available is also available. Under the view tab, Excel view tab, macro enable workbook is also available. You can record the macro here also. Select the macro, record macro. You can assign the name, shortcut key, description, and store macro in. Name, assign, shortcut key, and description of your macro. Name of the macro must be in a letter. It must not contain the space. Name of the macro is very important in the macro. The name must be begin with a letter. Yes, the name also must be begin with a letter. It must not contain the space. The macro name not contain any space. Underscore must be used in the separator word. If we will use the underscore, at that time we will use the separation of the word. It is called as a macro. Naming recording. You can use the macro name recording with the name must be recording with the letter. It must contain the space. Underscore must be using separation of this word. So we can use the macro on the basis of naming macro. We can use this naming macro, saving macro. We can use the multiple character. So we have to do this character on the naming macro. You can use this. The name must be contained with a letter. It must be contained with a space. The underscore must be used with the separation of work. So we have to separate of the work. So when we separation of the work, at that time macro it will be known. Saving macro. You can see the record macro screen. Here is a macro name. Here is a shortcut key. Store macro in this workbook. Personal macro workbook, new workbook, and this workbook. Yes. What is the difference between these three? This workbook, the macro will only be available in this spreadsheet also. It's been that, for example, my file name is book1. The macro is only available for this workbook only. That is a spreadsheet. It will be created. This workbook is what? For macro 1, macro 2, macro 3. This is called as this workbook name. So the macro store on only for this workbook. So it will only that workbook macro it will be stored. This is called as this workbook. Personal macro workbook, the macro will be available to all the spreadsheet, all the new created spreadsheet. This is called as a personal macro workbook. But if we can share the file, if we will share the particular file, at that time this workbook is usable, personal macro workbook is not usable. So make sure that if you use the personal macro workbook, at that time you will be use the particular file, it will be used only for this PC, not going from outside. So at that time, personal macro workbook work. If you will be used for this workbook, it means that the macro only available on this worksheet. New workbook, the macro only available, which have a newer than the previous version. It means that new Excel work file, it will be working from that file. So it will be has a new workbook, right? So this is a mainly difference in the macro work. Now, here we consider the macro from the Excel MS Office application. Macro actually written from the programming language, from the VBA, Visual Basic. But this simple macro, you have to create the performing of the repeated task on the macro recorder. Excel translation your language. Macro, record macro, tools, go for the macro, record macro, and dialog box. Here is a macro simple example running from the Excel sheet where you can see that name, location, title, hiring date, service. This is all are the option. You can see that option. So we can record this macro. When we are creating, identify the macro. When we are creating and identify this macro, hmm, record macro display is in a red sign. For example, we can discuss the example in the macro. For example, we will discuss the macro with a red sign and red image, thousand of record image, and that is a thousand of record book. So we want to do this manually. We will create a macro name, highlight manager. We will highlight it. To run it, use simply keyboard shortcut key Control H. Control H is a shortcut key. Value highlighted to any value. At that time, we will use the shortcut. To approach, we can start our recording, creating macro, highlight any record in the red color. For example, color is in red color for we can do the record macro. Color it will be appear with the red color. Here we will modify by adding additional VBA code. VBA code is for a record macro recording, but VBA is used that time when we have not used the recording macro. At that time, VBA code is working. We start out by making the cell first column of our data, say A2, that is our active cell. Then we start our macro recorder. We can start our macro recorder, that is our active set. So we can use this macro recorder of this file. Record macro, macro name, shortcut key, and description. We will use the recording macro name. We will use the shortcut key, store macro in description. We will use this. Now, in stop recording toolbar, this is recording start, recording stop. In stop recording toolbar, we have to relative reference button and push it. Then we click and drag to cell A2 to F2 value. Then we clicking on arrow font color and formatting toolbar is selecting red color and font color. We'll use this. When we click on the stop recording, recording is a stop. So it will be not usable for the recording from the stop button. So make sure that we will use this recording. From this recording, we will use this file. On the basis of this file, it will be usable from this. So we can use this file. Make sure that you have to recording file, stop recording. This all are the option. We will use this file. So make sure that we will use this file. On the basis of this file, we have to clear this file. Now here is a red color. Stop recording toolbar, relative reference toolbar, and red color toolbar. You can see the name is in non-red color, so we have to recording of this toolbar. Stop recording, it's a recording that will stop. Relative reference button, there are two macros available. Recording macro in a relative reference button, which is in the relative reference without using this is called the physical reference. Both the reference we can do with this your macro. All the macro can change the font color to red color in a zip cell. Then we have to happening in only for active cells. When it is run, file cell is right in the same arrow key. Visual Basic Editor. If we are going from the coding onto F11 to display the VBA code for this macro, we have to display that. This is a Visual Basic coding. Active cell A1 to F1 is selected. This value of the selected or the selection of this value, we have to font color is this. Now we want to add some macro. We will start the first recording process, do all the macro, see the macro manager, only changing the font color. So we have to, for the cell A2 for first recording and recording of this macro, we have to do this macro. We have to name from cell for A2, A2 is a your first recording macro. For this highlighting of this macro, we will use this highlighting macro. Application of photo reference. This is all are the code of VBA code. So first we will go for the recording part, then we will go for the VBA part. But VBA that is a must. Some part is a too difficult, so we can do this. When we have a macro created at the video and debugging the features to get it, we can then apply it to our list. So we can apply it from this list. So now apply it to our other list. So we can add the macro on the basis of this one. We have to do the macro recording. Recording of the macro, we have to the multiple tasks. With the using of macro, we have to color formatting, data formatting, tabular with its color. We can add subtraction, deletion of this macro. Then we can do with advanced filter with macro. We can use the relative reference with this macro. So we can use the different part on this macro. We can see with the using of example, with a different example, filtering with using of macro, advanced filtering with using this macro. So we have a different part. So we first we use with the macro. What is a macro? How we will use the macro? So we have a exact idea about the why we use the macro. On the basis of the macro, we have to do the exact idea. So first we go for the macro recording, then we go for the doing from this macro. So we will do with this macro. We will do with the filtering, advanced filtering with this macro. So we have do exact idea about the particular data. So we can do with this macro. With this file, we have to do this your macro file. So we have to do this macro file. On the basis of this macro file, we can do anything with your file. So we can do with the macro, but macro have some limitation. Yes, macro have some limitation. We have a particular what is the limitation in Excel? First, macro file always store in Excel, right? So Excel file we will do with this Excel file. We have to work this file. So we have do with this file on we can create on the basis of the particular file. So we can do this file with the doing of the Excel work. So on the basis of this file, I can do with this file with using of the particular value. So we can macro always save on Excel SM file. That is your first criteria, right? So we have to data with your first criteria. So we can work this your criteria. That is called as a macro enable file. So you have to work this file on the basis of this file. We have to easily do this your data. So you can work with the macro at that time. You have to do the particular data is in particular manner. So we will use this manner on the basis of macro. We have to have some limitation in Excel. So we have some limitation in Excel. So we can do the particular file. So make sure that we have to do this file on the particular basis. So we have to create the particular file and we can do this file on the basis of particular file. Okay. We can check the simple macro, what is a macro and what are other option is available from your side. So we can do this file on the basis of this file. We have to work with the other file also. So we have to do this file. We can create simple Excel file. Yes, now you can see here when the macro file is enabled, view. This is called as macro, right? Here is always also available the macro. No macro is available. When you are recording this macro, you have to click here. Otherwise, you click in this place. This is record macro. So both the places macro is available. First is your macro name. Second is the shortcut key. Store macro in. By default is this workbook. You can select personal macro workbook, new workbook. So you can use the this file. Then the description. Macro name. Macro name compulsory. Do with no spacing is allowed in the macro name. Only underscore is allowed in the macro name. Here is a shortcut key also available. Store macro in. You have to store macro in this workbook. Personal macro workbook and the new workbook. So you have stored the any one of the place, but make sure that macro name is useful because we have to give the macro one. So at that time we have no exact idea what is a macro number one. So make sure that macro is very useful. So whichever your places you are doing with the macro, at that time you want to use this macro at the particular name. So we have to use this. Yes. Only number is not allowed. Underscore is not allowed. Spacing is not allowed. So make sure that the macro name is a particular letter and combination of the number also. You can do the later with the combination of number. So when we use this macro, we will use the first of recording of this macro. Now, when we start the macro, at that time stop the macro is available. Macro, another option is available in the option command also. File option. You will be customize ribbons. This is all are the ribbons. You will be use this. This all are the ribbons. In the popular command, you can select the macro. At that time, here is available the macro also. And here is a macro tab also. So all the macro is available here. You can easily add the macro with using of the shortcut key. So macro is available on the two places. You will shortcut key macro. You will be use this macro. Otherwise, also you will be directly adding for this macro. You will do the both the way. You can use this. You can use the customized ribbons also. You can add the ribbons also. You can add in the ribbon macro also. You can see here. Here is my name data, and you can add the particular data. So you can add this data. Go for the advanced option, and here is a clicking drag and drop option. One option is macro option is also available. Show the chart taskbar. This is called as a taskbar. So the taskbar formula bar function screen tripping. If the function screen tripping is disabled, so whenever we are looking from equal to function name at that time function argument is not coming. If it is disabled, then horizontal scroll bar, vertical scroll bar, sheet tabs available. This is all are the options. We will use this option by using grouping option. We will discuss the grouping option also. So macro we will store on the tabular bar view also. So we can store the any places with using of macro. We can do this and we can work with this macro also. So make sure that macro is the individual file. At this time we have to recording or coding macro. We want to use this macro. On the basis of this macro, we have to do with the particular file. So we can use this file on the basis of macro record. Right, friends? Now we will give some data. For example, right now we will go for the control H. It's a shortcut key find and replace. What do we find and what do we replace this? Now we want to color this button. Right, this is color this button. Now, without using of macro, if I want to applicable here, then I will go to the second time on this time. We want to go for the third time, then third time of this way. So at that time, we have to create multiple times with using of this parameter. So we will use the multiple time. With using of multiple times, we have to create a multiple time from this color value also. So at that time, we have to do with the multiple format, multiple times we will use this parameter. For example, we have to put the color in first, we have to put the color in fourth, we have to put the color in sixth. All the position is same. So We have to do the color in every places. So it is very time consuming when we do this file. So when we recording of the macro, at that time you have to color in combination only from blank cells, and now you have to applicable from another cells also. So at that places macro is very usable. If for example, if I'm writing here 1, 2, 5, 9 and 10 and 15, if I'm totaling this value, right? Now this same thing we will provide it here: 15, 60, 80, 90, 40. So at this time we have created a second type sum. So if any process is repeated, so we will create the second time from this sum, right? So enter this places. So any places we have to do multiple times, so we have to use this value. On basis of this value we want to create a particular file calculation. We using of this calculation we have created multiple files. So we want to work this file. On the basis of this file, we have to recording of this macro, coding of this macro, we have to clearing from this value, so we can do this value, right? Then we have to applicable the border. For example, if I am applicable from this border, so now if I'm applicable from this border, now we can applicable here also and here also. So now we store the recording and we go the command macro. The macro is automatically stored this file. So we can use this macro. On the basis of this macro, we have to put the value. So when we put the value at that time, we have to creating the macro. So we give the first time command of the border value. So next time automatically border is created. You have not created the border. It is automatically create the border. So you can creating the border by using of this macro. You can use this macro. By using of this macro, we can use conditional formatting with the macro. We can use this, but macro have some limitation. We cannot do every operations with this macro. For example, if I'm totaling here, so this compulsory totaling is here also, right? So this cell is fixed. So you have to next time storing your macro here also. So make sure that macro always creating the position. And so if you are first total is a C1 to C5 and next total is D1 to D10, then it is not created. So it will be dependent on the particular cell. So at that time you have to use the VBA. So make sure that VBA, you can use the VBA and you can work with your VBA file. So you can do with this file. So with using a VBA, you can create any one of your places and you can work with this file. On the basis of this file, we have to do with advanced functionality. So you can do this functionality. We have to clear formatting, clear all macros. So we have to here is a clear all macro and we want to creating this macro. We want the picture also. Yes. If we put the same picture in every cells, we have to adding the picture option also, flip art options, shape falls options, smart art option. We want to create all the charts and smart art option. We want to create it this option. So we want to create it, this option also macro option. So we can create the table header footer, signature line, object line. So we want to create it this time. If I am using the formula tab, in the formula tab, but yes, if I'm using the data tab, at that time data validation, consolidated, and yes, must be used filter with the macro. That is the best use of the macro. At that time, filtering with using of macro, advanced filtering with using of macro. You can do the both the way. But yes, filtering with macro, that is the best way. You can use this macro. Filtering with macro, advanced filtering with this macro. So you can work with the macro with the using of filter and advanced filter with this macro. So you can do with the filter and advanced filter with this macro. You can do the work from the filtering and advanced filter with this macro. Data validation with this macro, grouping options, subtotal we're using this macro. But macro have a some limitation. You have to do with the macro in some places. Not all the places you have to work with the macro. So that is my concept. In some places we will not using from macro. For example, what if analysis we cannot do the create a what if analysis function. We can not create a function. We will put out the function in the what if analysis. Refresh value, yes. At that time we have to put out the macro. At that time we have to create the reference macro. Hide and unhide macro is also available. When we one click it's a hide, one click it's a unhide. Then we want to create that group and subtotal option. We want to create this option. Protect workbook, share workbook. We want to create the protect workbook and share workbook with this option. So you have to protecting and sharing from this workbook. We have to go for the view tab also. So view tab we have to work with the macro. This is all are the switching window and all other options. So we will. This is a developer tab. When we using the recording macro, at that time we have to use the recording macro on this tab. So Visual Basic macro and recording macro is available. At that time we will use the recording also. So we will do the recording on the basis of this recording. We have to create a VBA macro also. So we have to create the VBA on the basis of this one. We have to do the Visual Basics macro, relative reference macro, record macro. We have to do the view code property, run macro dialog box. So we have to do this macro. On the basis of this macro, we have to recording of this particular file. So we have to record this file. So we can do the recording of this macro. So on the basis of the recording macro, I will do the particular coding of this file. So we have to available from the code. At that time, we have to do this recording of this file and with record of the macro. So we have to do this file on the recording, input record, output record. This is an input output recording this file. But make sure that VBA language, you know about the VBA language. This is called Visual Basics Editor. When you click on the Visual Basics Editor, this is your coding part. You know about all the tab functionalities. So we will create a VBA. Otherwise, else we cannot create a VBA because VBA is a different language. We will use the Excel file. What is called VBA? For example, in Excel, some function is available, right? So we can create our own function. For example, we can create a function. It will be work the sum, average, minimum, maximum, and do the all these things. It will be in one places. So at that time, we have to create first sum function, then average function, then multiplication function, and we can create at that time macro when we have a single click, and it will be work for all these things. With using of VBA, we can do this. We can create our own macro or the basis of this macro we have to do with the macros. So make sure that this macro is useful when we are creating from this macro. On the basis of this macro, you have to work from the particular file. So we want to use this file on the basis of macro. So we can add this macro. On the basis of this macro, we have to adding from particular file and we can create a particular data on the basis of this one file. So make sure that we have to adding the particular data. On the basis of this data, we have to particular file. So we want to create it from this file on the basis of VB. This is our as a VBA. Now view from the record macro, view macro. This is all other macro. It will be open, it will be created, this workbook we will create it, new workbook we will create it, and all open workbook it will be created. All open workbook, all the macro we will be created. We can show this macro. This is called as a view macro. Use relative reference macro. Use relative reference macro is not basically set of the position. It's a particular set of the particular next. If the first macro is in stored in first line, then second macro stored in the second line. At that time, it will be dependent on a simple macro. It will be dependent on the line. It means that if we will store in a B8 at that time, all the data is stored in B8, right? If the data is stored 8, B8, B9, B10, B11, at that time we will use the relative reference now. It will be always stored into the next to next position. So first position, second position, third position, fourth position. We will store the data in different positions. So at that time, we have to store the data at a different position. We want to use it. Use the relative reference macro, not a particularly simple macro. So this is the mainly difference between simple macro and relative reference macro. We want to use this relative reference macro and the simple macro. On the basis of relative reference and simple macro, we want to use this file on the particular basis. So now you have the clear idea about this one. Use a relative reference macro. When you are clicking that, at that time it will be create the comment. Okay friends, thank you. We will go for the next part on the macro.